What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of the Dolphins In Depth podcast. I'm Daniel Oyefusi. That is David Neal. Thanks so much for tuning in. Quick reminder before we start, make sure to subscribe to the Miami Herald YouTube page. Like, share, comment, all that good stuff, as well as subscribe to the Miami Herald.
Miami Herald.
Exactly. Ladies and gentlemen, draft week is finally upon us. The NFL's three-day event starts Thursday night in Kansas City and spans through Saturday, where the final 4 rounds will be taking place. The Miami Dolphins, as you know, or if you don't know, for the second consecutive season, don't have a first-round pick. A little different from last year. Last year, they traded their first-round pick to the Chiefs in the trade package that brought back Tyreek Hill to Miami. This year, they were supposed to have 2, but if you remember, back in July, tampering, Tom Brady, NFL, and Sean Payton, NFL, took that first rounder away. The second one, which they got from the 49ers a couple years back, they sent that to the Denver Broncos in the trade that got Bradley Chubb. We actually got the opportunity to speak to Bradley Chubb Wednesday afternoon, so definitely check out the story on him and how he's feeling to be reunited with new defensive coordinator Vic Fangio, who was his head coach back in Denver. But we got to get back to the nitty gritty, which is the draft. The Dolphins held the pre-draft news conference last week. We spoke to GM Chris Grier as well as assistant GM Marvin Allen about their plans. Not really their plans because they don't divulge those top state secrets, but just their overall thought process entering the 3-day event. And we also got to speak to Tua Tagovailoa for the first time in a news conference since Christmas Day. So we got a lot to break down in this episode, but as always, we're gonna start with the draft, where as I said, the Dolphins have a league low 4 picks, a lot of wheeling and dealing in Miami the past couple of years, so just 4 picks, but they do have 2 day 2 picks. They have a second rounder and a third rounder, number 51 and number 84. There's a lot of projections, prognostications, predictions, desires, demands from Dolphins.
Nobody knows a daggone thing.
We know, but that's the fun in it all. But nonetheless, I mean,
including the people picking, if you see their draft record,
just throwing darts.
Yeah,
but nonetheless, interesting potential option at number 51. The Dolphins doing a lot of the legwork in free agency. As we know, they've really built this roster up to a point where there's a lot of talk about AFC contention for the division. Players and coaches are actively speaking about Super Bowl, and it's not far-fetched. So this is an opportunity at 51 really to get a real difference maker. I was on a conference call last week with NFL Network's Daniel Jeremiah, and he said, yeah, the Dolphins can get a darn good player at 51. Again, not darn good player, not a good player, a darn good player.
Darn good player.
So, it's an interesting draft because different from some years where the overall sentiment is maybe it's not it's not as deep of a draft in some areas. You talk about the first round, and obviously the Dolphins don't have a first round pick, but you talk about the first round and people are saying there's only 15 to 17, maybe 20 max legitimate first round options. But there are also some interesting names in that second round range where the Dolphins are going to be picking. And I think where there's really going to be an opportunity for the Dolphins at the tight end position. It's a position that we've talked about a lot the past couple months, weeks. Talked about it for a long time. They lose Mike Gesicki. They keep Durham Smythe, but they really don't have like that legit, like old school inline blocker. This for all the positions that are kind of viewed as kind of weak, kind of iffy. Tight end class is the one where people are saying, all right, this is the best we've seen in years. Marvin Allen said last week, this is one of the better tight end classes you're going to see, and he thinks that a lot of these guys are going to go off the board really quickly. So that's a spot that obviously you gotta see how the chips fall. There's 50 teams that are picking, or I guess 50 teams that are picking in front of the Dolphins. But if you get to 51 and you see a legitimate tight end who you think can fill that that inline, that block and roll, and also like do some things in the passing game. I know some of the names that have been floated out there: Iowa Sam Laporta, Georgia Darnell Washington, who might be the best blocker in the draft regardless of position. People are saying that he might be like an extra offensive lineman. There's some other names out there, but in my mock draft, I set it up where I had them taking Iowa Sam Laporta, who I think can block. He can really do some things in the passing game. I think that's the one position on this team where I'm like, I think the Dolphins can really find somebody in the draft on day two, and like that can be like a day one starter, plug in and make an impact. I think that, if you look across the roster, there's not a ton of holes. If you draft a lot of positions, it's going to be more like depth guys, more backups. But that tight end spot is one where I think the Dolphins should really target an instant impact. What are your overall thoughts on, philosophy? Should the Dolphins, draft for need? Excuse me, on day
Oh
two?
yeah, I mean, second round is still I think is a need round. Um, uh, unless I mean, yeah, you always make everybody makes their big list, and um, unless somebody who's really high on your list, just takes some weird, strange, like Plinko chip fall to you, then then I think especially in the NFL draft, you have to look at need. And the Dolphins do have a need at tight end. If it's a strong suit in the draft, go for it. But you have to wonder if they like how many of these guys they like, who
Yeah.
they like.
Yeah, because you're right. We don't know. We're all just judging
Right.
here kind of
Because
like in a vacuum, but
you
they
know,
might a guy that we think is a good fit, they might say that's a terrible fit. So we just
right.
don't know.
They have problems with, they didn't like the way his mama raised him, or they got, there's daddy issues, or turned the wrong way at the combine. They Teams make judgments for very strange reasons. Um, when you would think they would just put on the film and judge a player by what kind of football player he is. They try to come up with all sorts of reasons to either A, take the guy they want, or B, take the guy they want like instinctively, or B, just not feel like they're too much out there in a limb. So yeah, we don't know who they like in this tight end class. I think Darnell Washington, definitely he's going to be gone. He's
Yeah,
going to
I was gonna say like that's I'm not
that's
counting on it, but if he's there, I think that's the guy where you like just run up to the you just
if
race the
he's there,
car
I
up.
want to
Yeah.
know why. That's like somebody. That's like
It's also almost like it's too good to
that's
be
like the
true. You kind
super
of
smoking
hesitate.
person who's like, that's like the person you look at and they're like, man, that the guy or the woman who's like, just seems to have it all going on and everything, and they're in their late 40s, but they've never been married. You're like, why? Why is this person still there? Why are they still on the table? Um, and especially when you're talking into the second round. I mean, teams have already exhausted their first round picks, and you got another. They come back around, and the carousel comes around again. They're still going, nah, we can't.
Yeah.
Nah. If he slips the Dolphins probably need to pass him by. There's probably a reason. But the Iowa guy certainly looks good. I mean, they've got a history of producing decent tight ends.
Yeah.
I would say find, whichever guy they're in love with or they're in like with, that can block, because they got a lot of people who can catch a pass.
Yeah.
They need somebody who can, who can block and catch a pass, not somebody who can pass and kind of get in front of somebody, when you run once in a while. They need somebody who can block. That also will be a huge help to the offensive line.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah,
So
and obviously, I mean, there's offensive line is also a possibility as well at 51. We talked a lot about how they kind of have two unsettled spots, left guard and right tackle. I found it interesting that first question Chris Grier was asked last week was from our own Barry Jackson, and he said, "Is the expectation, or do you plan on having Austin Jackson be the starting right tackle?" And Chris Grier's words verbatim were, the expectation is that he's the starter. So it's lion season around this time. I'm not saying they're lying, but maybe sometimes you kind of withhold the truth. I know they did bring in a veteran offensive lineman in for an offensive tackle, specifically for a visit a couple of days back. So maybe they're doing their due diligence on that spot. I'm not sure if there's a offensive tackle that's going to be available at 51 that you can just kind of put in right as a day one starter. That's obviously an option. You got defensive line. One thing that stood out to me was Chris Grier talking about, they through it all, regardless of what needs they have and what kind of holes they have on the roster, they want to take the best player available. And he mentioned how last year, they took Channing Tindall at what was it, number 102 with their first pick that they had in the third round, and that was kind of a weird. I mean, it was a pick that we thought that they had a need at a 10 linebacker, but it was a veteran field group. You had a lot of veterans in that group, so he didn't play a lot as a rookie. But Chris Grier mentioned that, hey, we had a lot of guys on 1 year contracts, so obviously you want to think of 2023, but you also want to look ahead. So that's why I think, there's a possibility they take a defensive lineman because they don't need a starter at defensive line, but they got a couple guys that could be free agents. Maybe you want to kind of plan for the future. I think that's really important for a team that is invested. We talk about they've invested so much money in, the next year or two in these big contracts, the way they've structured it. It might come to, ahead where you gotta make some changes. You have to maybe part ways with some veterans, and then you need some younger guys to kind of step into those positions. So I think there's a good chance. I mean, there's definitely a possibility we see them take a position that we're kind of like, what? Like, you really don't need it. You don't need somebody there, but on their board, it was somebody that they had at the top of their list. And regardless of, where the roster was currently set, they wanted to take that guy.
I also, I don't think it hurts to like beef up the defense to stockpile players on defense. Why not? Why not? It's not like there's not injuries aren't going to happen. It's not like guys don't, it's not like that defense was the steel curtain last year, and maybe it wouldn't hurt to have, you bring in somebody, you draft somebody and at your position, you're like, whoa, wait a minute. I thought I was the guy, so, and you realize it's hammered home once again. You got to prove you're the guy all over again, unless you are a true star. And I see the Dolphins defense as having a lot of good players. How many true stars they have? Xavier Howard, maybe.
Jalen Ramsey.
Okay.
Javon Holland, Jalen Phillips are kind of budding star. They're budding stars. They're on the uptick. Bradley Chubb has been to a Pro Bowl or two.
Yeah, Bradley Chubb, I think, doesn't he know he needs to show these folks something for that first round pick today?
I mean, we talked to him about it a couple hours ago.
Right,
he's like, hey, they brought me here for a reason.
They brought you here for a reason, and nothing hammers that home like somebody else that reason was not fulfilled than them bringing in somebody else in your position, drafting somebody younger than you, just in case last year was not an aberration and it was true slippage. So got no problem with beefing up the defense. And I think it's sort of like shopping in a store also. Don't take what you don't take what you only kind of like because it's on sale and because there's value there. I don't think you should do that in drafting. I think good teams don't do that in drafting. They draft, they draft what they like, and they draft who they like, and they have what fits. They know their profile of what fits their philosophy at that position, and they draft toward that. They don't worry about projections. They don't worry about other. They don't worry about everybody else unless they think that somebody else is working on the same philosophy and might get a guy and they can, they might try to move up. But yeah, I have no problem with them, stockpiling defense and, drafting more guys that even if it might push the defensive starters and, might be fill-in for the inevitable injuries. Injuries
Yeah.
happen.
No, most definitely. The other option that's
Um,
been floated as well is, a possible trade up. That's another thing that Grier was asked. And obviously it's a little bit of a tough ask because again, the Dolphins only have 4 picks. They have a second rounder, third rounder, and then a sixth and seventh rounder. But he did say that some teams in the bottom half of the first round have been calling about the possibility of, hey, a guy that we like isn't available in the 20s, I'm presuming. Would you be willing to, talk about a trade? He said no serious discussions. But it's been thrown out there. I mean, there was also I know Peter King, very respected journalist, mentioned the possibility of, Jahmyr Gibbs, the Alabama running back. He's widely regarded as the number 2 back in the draft class. Some people have him above Bijan Robinson from Texas. Peter King mentioned that Mike McDaniel might love to get his hands on a guy like Jahmyr Gibbs. The question is, I mean, if you're trying to trade up from 51 into the back end of the first round, probably going to have to give up probably a second next season, most likely a first to make that swap. Is that something you do for a running back? I'm not really sure about that. We've talked a lot about upgrading the running back position, Dalvin Cook, and the rumors there. For me, I'm not sure if I do that for a running back as good as he is, because I think he might be the most dynamic running back in terms of pass catching. I don't know if that's a little too steep for me to, trade a first
if
rounder as well as the number 51 overall pick to move all the way up into the first round. Maybe if he like drops
if
into the third
if
round, you get to the 40s, late 30s, maybe, but I don't know about trading to the first round unless it's a offensive tackle type position or something like that, like where you can really, really get a legitimate upgrade from what you currently have.
Yeah, I mean, if they're really in love with the guy, okay, I guess. But
And this is also a draft class too. I mean, we always say this. I feel like we say this every year. Like you can find running backs in the later rounds. This is a very
right,
good running back draft class.
you've also, you're sitting here with guys who, they know your system, they know you like how they run. Yeah, there's, at some point there's going to be depreciation, major depreciation, but do you really see it now enough to spend that kind of pick on their that kind of capital to move up? And it's probably going to cost you a pick, and you have other things you need to address.
Yeah.
um
They only have 5 picks next year too, so just keep that in mind. I
yeah,
mean,
yeah.
like
So
they need to start like keeping these picks at some point and like
right, you
get
have
some
to
young
start,
players in the
start
pipeline.
using them and hitting on them.
Yeah.
And uh so I think when you're that's another thing. When teams are looking to trade out,
There's a reason why they're trying to
trade out
trade
of the
out.
first round, that's like saying, man, yeah, we really don't. Nah, that's saying the club's not that good, so not
Yeah.
that hot. So let's maybe you don't need to trade into the club. Maybe you just need to go on to that bar you were headed for,
Yeah.
and see what's there and make your picks there. Um, yeah, I can't see unless there's somebody you just really love and they slip down and you're just they're really in love with the guy and it just completely fills a need. Trading in the first round just seems like,
Yeah. That's a lot.
yeah,
It's a steep price for a team that only has 4 picks.
yeah,
And again, we talked a lot about how they really feel confident in the running back position. But again, that's the allure of it all that we just don't know. And the Dolphins certainly do have options on the table for this 3-day draft event. All right, we're gonna take a short break, but when we come back on the other side of things, Tua Tagovailoa spoke at a news conference for the first time in several months. And he divulged some very interesting information that has social media, TV networks, and all the like talking. We're going to break down his comments, as well as talk about some big news that took place this week in the AFC East with Aaron Rodgers coming to town. Stay locked with us. We'll be back soon. What's going on, everybody? Still here on the Dolphins In Depth podcast with David Neal, talking all things Dolphins. Now, in the first half, we previewed the 2023 NFL Draft. What the Dolphins should do. 4 picks, a lot of options. Second half, we're going to go back a week because Tua Tagovailoa had his first news conference since Christmas Day. As you all know, sustained his second diagnosed concussion, was effectively shut down for the rest of the year. Haven't heard a lot from him in the months since that happened. He had his luau event, fundraiser event a couple of weeks back where we did speak to him, but this was the first time where we spoke to him extensively about that second stint in the concussion protocol, how he's feeling, what he's done this offseason, what he's been told. And he made some headline shaking news with some comments in which he said that he considered retirement for a time, as he kind of spoke with his family about what he should do going forward. And the exact quote is, "I considered it for a time, having sat down with my family, having sat down with my wife, having those kinds of conversations. But really, it would be hard for me to walk away from this game with how old I am. With my son, I always dreamed of playing as long as I could, to where my son knew what he was watching his dad do." He continues, he says, "It's my health, it's my body. I feel like this is what's best for me and my family. I love the game of football. If I didn't, I would walk away a long time ago." Now, Tua went on to talk about how he spoke to several independent neurologists, what they've told him. They said that CTE isn't much of a concern for him, as compared to, players that are really banging like their helmets together, like offensive linemen, defensive linemen, linebackers. He also said that, similar to what Chris Grier and Mike McDaniel told us, he's not any more prone to concussions. The extended time away helped him. Sitting on the sideline, not taking those hits. He talked about some of the jujitsu stuff that he's been doing, trying to tuck his head, and just kind of the specifics of, just putting yourself in a position where, your body isn't taking those hits that may be conducive to head injuries. But obviously it was the retirement comments that really, got a lot of people's eyes. And I got to say, for full context, transparency, I was the one that actually asked that question. I said, truthfully, through it all, at any point, did you consider walking away? Because again, this was something that was discussed a lot by a lot of people on the outside. They said Tua needs to retire. He shouldn't be playing. He shouldn't come back. He shouldn't risk his health. And I was just curious. People heard a lot from the outside, but I was wanting to know what he was thinking internally. And shout out to him, credit to him. He was very transparent and forthcoming with that. I don't know what I expected him to say, but my reaction was that it was a very normal reaction for him to think that. I mean, we might be understating how tough, the past couple months have been for him, in terms of, being knocked out in national television in Cincinnati in that night primetime game. Even the couple of days before, what he went through with hitting his head and going through the protocol and whatnot, and, having to answer questions through league investigations and whatnot. And then obviously the second time where he seemingly plays through a concussion, and then he's sidelined for the, several months. He can't play in the final couple games, the season-ending loss.
Playoffs.
Yeah, I asked him as well too. I asked before. I was like, "What's it been like?" And he's like, "It's been tough, because I wanted to be out there. I wanted to be, with my teammates." And he even said, like we asked him, it was asked to him, were you close to returning? Because we never really knew where he was in the protocol. We didn't see him on the field after that Christmas Day game, and he said, "Hey, I don't know where I was in the protocol," but he's added, if Chris Grier, Mike McDaniel went up to him and said, you're good, he said, I would have jumped out there and I would have played. So that just tells you where his mindset was in terms of really wanting to be out there, wanting to play no matter what.
Of course.
But I felt like it was a very normal reaction. I felt like it's almost a little bit like, I think the reaction was a little bit overblown. Like I would have thought more if he said, like, "Nah, it never crossed my mind." Like I thought that would have been almost like negligent, with his health and whatnot. But I think he said the right things. We talked about a lot. He's going through jujitsu. He's, he mentioned, he said again, he's trying to strengthen his body to sustain a season. I mean, he knows what people are saying about him being injury prone, and he's doing what he can. He said to get bigger, to get stronger, and to last an entire season. Because we keep on saying it, like that's the only question about him. I mean, if he's on the field, they're one of the best offenses in the NFL. So he's doing whatever he can to be on the field. We don't know if it'll work, but I think he's saying the right things. I completely understand him saying I consider retirement for a time. He has a little baby that was just born last year. His newlywed wife. This is all normal. This is all normal. If God forbid these issues pop up again, I mean, yeah, there's going to be tough conversations. We just don't know. But he says he's had the reassurance from the independent doctors that he's good to go. And all we can do is hope that he's good and he doesn't have this setback.
Well, and if you're not well enough to do this thing that you've always done, and that means, I mean, there's symptoms there. There's, if it's headaches or there's discomfort beyond the usual there. And there's a tremendous worry, especially if you have a kid, because you're thinking, you don't want any problems. I think if you're a thinking parent, and I'm a parent, and I don't, I've gotten much less judgmental of other parents as I've become a parent the longer I am one. But I do think if you're a thinking parent, you do kind of you worry about, you think about, am I putting myself in a position to, be there for my kid? Or am I putting myself in a position where my kid's going to have to be there for me at too young an age? And so naturally, you would think about retire. You would think about, okay, I'm you're not well enough to play, and they're holding you. These people whose jobs are on the line, they're keeping, and in a business not known for having the biggest consideration beyond their own job and their own butt, those people are keeping you out of the game. So that says a lot. And it is natural to be thinking, okay, wait a minute, maybe do I need to be doing, is this necessary? He's already made a jackload of money. Okay, I'm quite sure.
The opportunity to make a lot more money, like
It's also an opportunity to make a lot more money.
Generational wealth.
But right, it's generational wealth. But if you don't know the next generation, if you're in a situation where you have to be repeatedly told who the next generation is, then that's not generational wealth. You're the thinking that the health and not wanting to burden your spouse or your kid, your child who is just a baby now, and you're thinking, okay, I want this kid to know, I want this kid to watch me play, but I also want this kid to know Tua, right? And not be some absent-minded guy. We have to leave notes for around the house or something. Okay. So I think it's natural to think, do I cut it off here? That's very hard for any athlete at that level to do that. And even, with, even if something like concussions are hanging for you, you see athletes who, they'll fight through knee injuries. They'll fight through it. Concussions are a scary thing. is probably the scariest of them all because it is your head. It is the one thing that, you know, you kind of want to keep about you after your career is done. Okay, you expect everything else to hurt. There's going to be some things that are not never going to be completely right, but you kind of want the head okay, so you can enjoy, your kids, your spouse, your grandkids, your cousins, your uncles, your father, your mother. So yeah, it's an easy thing to think about, but it's also a hard thing for an athlete to say, yeah, I'm done, and it's not the money, it's the competing and that feeling of Sunday, when they run out in the field, and that feeling of the locker room when you're part of it, and you're part and you are a leader in the locker room, and you're part of this group that is accomplishing something, and it's trying to fight together to accomplish something. You hear so many athletes say that what they miss is, especially in the sports that do a lot of travel, the saying is they miss the back of the bus as much as anything. And I think with NFL players, you have that, plus there's only 16 games, or 17 games rather, sorry, 17 games. And that puts so much more importance on everyone, and the building up of, that builds up during the week to the big, this big game and this big event. And I think it puts an even more like rush, feel, electricity to playing in those games. So it's very hard to walk away from that, especially if you feel like maybe you're not done. Maybe there's more there. What if, I'm sure he's thinking, what if this is the year? What if this is the year that he plays all 17? What if this is the year that it all comes together, and, he's part of a Super Bowl winning team? So yeah, I'm sure there was a lot going on there, and I'm sure there were a lot of discussions, uh, or some hard discussions. There might not have been a lot of discussions, but there were some, you know, serious discussions, let's say, with the spouse.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, he said,
Because
yeah,
yeah, yeah. People underestimate how the roles of the wives in, you know, the lives of players and coaches. They really do, because we're all, yes, these are, all, big strong alpha males and everything, but they're also people, and just they're also husbands, and you know they've got wives who have their own, who have their own ideas about the future, and what's best for the family. So um
yeah. I mean, like you said, it was very tough. You know, he said it would be very tough for him to walk away, just again, given his age, and everything that he's put into it. And again, I think that the biggest thing here is that the team, the higher ups on the team said that they were given the medical assurances. He said he's been given the medical assurances. I know that there's always going to be questions about the hand. I think we're always going to be a little skeptical given what he went through, being put out there 4 days after he took that bump to the head against the Bills. But he had to go through a long process. He had to see people that were, neurologists and specialists that were independent of the team, of the NFL. They've given him the assurance that he's good to go. So again, all you can kind of do at this point is hope that he stays healthy, because we don't wish injury on anybody. We know his capabilities. We've seen it. So now it's just a matter of putting it all together and staying on the field. All right, before we get out of here, we got to touch on some quick AFC East news. After several weeks, months, just stand on the TV, glued to the TV to see it.
Long courtship, man.
A long courtship. That's the best way to put it.
Yeah.
The New York Jets finally finished the trade with the Green Bay Packers to acquire Super Bowl winning, MVP winning quarterback Aaron Rodgers. A lot of different trades and whatnot, draft picks going back and forth in the trade. But essentially, it's a pick swap. The Packers and the Jets swapping first round picks in Thursday's first round. And then essentially, like the real crux of this trade is an additional second round pick that could become a first if Aaron Rodgers plays 65% of his games in 2023. Now, essentially, if Aaron Rodgers is healthy, Packers are going to get a first round pick. But nonetheless, it adds a lot of juice to an AFC East division that you could say might be the toughest, the hardest division in the AFC. I mean, in the league. I mean, you got the Bills, obviously. You got the Dolphins, who finished 2 last year, have upgraded the roster. And now you got a Jets team that was very competitive despite maybe some of the worst quarterback play. And then obviously you got the Patriots rounding it out and whatnot, and they're the Patriots, they're always going to be in the mix, but it's looking like they might be a distant, in the
right. Yeah.
But still, that's always a tough out. The question is this? I mean, are the Jets staking a claim to jump the Dolphins in 2023, potentially compete for the AFC East crown? Because Vegas, we always talk about Vegas. They got the second best odds in the division, that being the New York Jets over the Dolphins. I don't know if I agree with that. That's what Vegas is saying right now.
Well, I mean, if the Jets defense is what it was last year, and Aaron Rodgers is still even 80-85% of Aaron Rodgers,
That could be something.
That's a big problem for everybody, because he really, Tom Brady's had the greatest career of any quarterback ever. But if you want to talk about the various physical abilities of a quarterback, and that have been demonstrated on an NFL field, boy, it's real hard to beat Aaron Rodgers for that combination. I mean, nobody likes to call him a dual threat quarterback, even though he has been his whole career. He makes throws that nobody else would dream of trying. And he makes them regularly. Like you're like shocked if he doesn't. Like, oh yeah, okay, yeah. He just did that throw, that 50-yard throw on the rope, throwing back against his body, that nobody else, you would get benched for trying if you're most other quarterbacks. And he's done it for a very long time. And I don't know what, the only thing I would question is like what kind of, I'm sure he comes into that locker room and it's obviously instant respect, instant status. But is he the kind of guy that, I don't know, that can really pull a team along leadership wise? Like it's a new team. Like he did it in 2010 with the Packers. He dragged that team. We have never seen a quarterback drag a team to a championship like that.
Yeah,
they literally were losing everything. Yeah. Oh yeah, you got a great tight end. He's gone. You got a great running back. Let's take him out for the season. He won Super Bowl MVP. His receivers set an unofficial record for drops. I mean, but he was there the whole time. He's always, you went to the Packers, you knew, okay, Aaron Rodgers is the guy. When you're coming into a new situation, there's a new dynamic. and it doesn't always work the same way.
Yep.
You know, see Brett Favre when he went to New York in the Jets. There was a physical issue near the end of that season, but there's also, it just never felt like he was, in control of that team in that locker room the way he would have been in Green Bay. And Aaron Rodgers, different guy, interesting personality. That would be the only question I'd have. Otherwise, if he's physically close to being what we've seen for the last 14 years. That's a problem. That's a problem.
Yeah,
and, that's a real problem. And because he finds ways to beat you, he finds ways to do ridiculous things, and as much as any quarterback I think who's ever played the game. And so and like I said, the Jets have a defense. If that defense is close to that level again.
Yeah, they were top 5 last year. And they might not need to be top 5. I mean, the pieces are there for sure. I mean, especially on offense. I mean, I think it's definitely an upgrade over what he had in his last season in Green Bay. You got Garrett Wilson, you got Breece Hall, another running back that I'm blanking on the name of, but they have 2 good running backs. I know they just signed McCole Hardman from the Chiefs. They got Allen Lazard, kind of joined him from Green Bay. And he has his old play caller, Nathaniel Hackett, who didn't work out as the Broncos head coach, but he has that familiarity with him back when he was offensive coordinator of the Packers. So, I mean, pieces are there. I know this is a move that was kind of met with some skepticism, some jokes on Twitter. I think maybe it's because it's the Jets, it's Aaron Rodgers. It's kind of good to troll them and whatnot. But I think it makes the division just that much tougher. I will say though, I still would take the Dolphins. I think that I'll say I don't know if the Dolphins defense will be as good as will be better than the Jets defense, but the pieces are there. I will say one thing: we kind of know more or less what to expect with the Jets defense. There's some questions about how long it's going to take for things to come together on the offense, and then you look at the Dolphins, where more or less, like we say, if Tua's in the lineup, we kind of know what to expect on offense. Whereas Vic Fangio, the expectation is that they're going to be, a real good defense, so they're going to improve. But the pieces still got to come together and whatnot.
Right.
So it's kind of certainty on one side of the ball, a little bit of uncertainty, but potential on the other side of the ball. And I mean, it's gonna be a bloodbath in the division, though. I mean, I will say I was looking at the schedule, and it's like the AFC East, they have to play each other in the division. They have to play the NFC East as well as the AFC West. So those are like, it's not a cakewalk. You know how we talked about the schedule, you get like three weeks where you kind of can beat up on some teams. Ooh. I don't think that's going to be that's not going to be the case this year. But still, I like the Dolphins. I think that they're top end potential. I mean, we just know how lethal this offense is when Tua is in there with Jalen Waddle, Tyreek Hill. And I do think that the defense is going to rise to the occasion and do their part. But now it's going to be hard. I mean, when you look at it, the way the playoff seedings are set up now, obviously you have the 4 division winners, and you have 3 wild card spots. I don't know if the second team from the AFC East is going to make it into the wild card spot, because they might just beat up on each other. It might be like the last week of the season, you got like 8-9 wins, and you're trying to get a 10th win to get in. Like, I don't know.
Right.
What I do know is we're going to have a lot of late nights, because the Jets are going to have a lot of primetime games. Dolphins are going to have primetime games. So I'm going to be up late a couple nights in the fall and the winter. I don't know if I'm looking forward to that, because as a writer, I'm not really fond of the late night games and, not being able to hit deadline. I like the 1 p.m. games. I like getting there following my story, getting back home for Sunday night football. There's going to be a couple of weeks where I'm going to be at press box till 2, but, that comes with the territory.
See, I agree. I have appreciation for that. There was also I started to like those weeks where they played on like a Monday night or something, and you could sit there and watch the 1 o'clock and the 4 o'clock.
That's true.
And chill out. But yeah, I know I understand what you're saying. Of course, our print deadlines, yeah, you're actually not gonna have to worry about that.
That's true. That's very true.
If you're looking for breaking news, it's not in the Miami Herald print edition, folks. That's not happening. So, but it's online, definitely online, just like this will be. And so, yeah, it's gonna be a fun season for the AFC East.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of excitement in the AFC East. I mean, we talked to Bradley Chubb. He said, he's excited to have another top flight quarterback. He gets to get his hands and sack another big time quarterback. So, I mean, those matchups are definitely going to be appointment television in 2023. Well, that brings us to the end of another edition of the Dolphins In Depth podcast. I want to thank you guys as always for tuning in. Make sure to subscribe to Miami Herald YouTube page, like, share, comments, as well as subscribe to the Miami Herald. Draft starts Thursday night. Dolphins don't have any picks, but Friday and Saturday they're going to be active. So you definitely want to stay locked onto the Miami Herald website. We're going to have wall-to-wall coverage. Everyone the Dolphins pick, as well as afterward on on Friday and Saturday. Chris Grier, Mike McDaniel speaking about those selections, the thought process, all that. So you definitely want to stay locked to the Miami Herald website.
And after the NFL draft, we have team by team capsules
from yours truly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, talking about how well or how teams did, and yeah, they might actually even be accurate. Who knows?
Yeah,
I actually remember Chris Johnson. Like, some people don't remember because he was so fast. His career went by in a few seasons.
Tennessee Titans. Yeah, CJ2K.
Yeah. I think I gave him a D for taking him.
Yeah, I was gonna say. Shows how much you knew.
Yeah, I've done stories where we've gone back and looked at our grades. But no, there will be no grades, but there will just be summaries of each team, and in addition to all the content that Daniel will be putting out, and of course we'll be here the week after to go, okay. Yeah. Because afterwards we'll act like we know something.
As we always do.
Yeah.
Just to find out that we knew nothing.
We know nothing. We know nothing.
But yeah, it's a fun week. Yeah, but a fun weekend coming up. Obviously, the draft. We got the Heat on the brink of knocking off the #1 seed. You got the Marlins looking, I mean, a little better than average, respectable, I guess. So as always, definitely want to stay locked onto the Miami Herald website.
There's another team in the playoffs still.
Yeah, but it's not.
It's not looking good with them in the playoffs.
Yeah, the Panthers as well.
11-0 last night.
Panthers as well. We got all the sports going full throttle in South Florida. But we'll be back next week to recap another week of Dolphins football, recap the draft as well as look ahead. You guys enjoy the weekend, and we'll see you next week. See you.